Hello and welcome. Vijay Srinivas, US President Donald Trump had dropped the tariff bombshell on India, slapping India with 25% of tariffs. And US President also seems to be visibly miffed about India's close ties with that of Russia. On his Truth Social platform, United States President Donald Trump had said, India has always been the largest buyer of energy from Russia, along with China, at a time when everyone wants Russia to stop the killing in Ukraine. All things not good, he says. And he also talks about the massive trade deficit, which is about $45 billion. And joining me to explain more is, trade expert D. Ravikant, all the way from Geneva. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the Federal, sir. I want to begin with you there. What's the significance of this 25% tariff on India, and what does it actually mean for India?
So, thank you, Vijay. The 25% tariff is, on the face of it, is less than it's 1% less than what he had announced on April 2nd. That was the so-called reciprocal tariff, where he said India will be subjected to a 26% tariff. And but what he did now was a very arbitrary decision, because even yesterday, that was on 29th, he was saying that we are still negotiating and there is some kind of discussion that is underway at this point of time. And all of a sudden, if he had taken this decision today, of course, this decision is by no stretch of imagination is final. India will definitely approach Trump again and make a plea. But India has sort of bear the brunt because among the developing countries, 25% tariff on your goods entering the American market would almost, put you in a very difficult side. You will lose the market access in US. Which is a big blow. So it's coming at a time.
What sectors do you think that are going to be likely be affected, likely be hit the hardest here?
There will be several sectors. In fact, you have a trade surplus of 44 billion. That was 23-24. So now the sectors that will be affected most are already steel and aluminum, where he had imposed a sectoral tariff of 50%. And then he had imposed a 25% tariff on auto and auto products, in which in which India is a big exporter. Then you have pharmaceuticals, the generic drugs, where India is a big exporter of generic drugs to the American market. And then you have several agricultural items as well. And then you have textiles and clothing, which is a very main export. We've already been, India has already been hit because they sort of terminated what are called the GSP benefits, generalized system of preferences, by Trump in his first term, which is a loss of 7 billion. And on the top of it, if you're imposing 25% tariff on textiles and clothing, for example, you're competing here with Vietnam, you're competing here with
Bangladesh,
Cambodia, and several other countries, Bangladesh, for example.
That's right.
So it's a kind of a sectoral sort of roadblock for you, that you will be severely affected. So what we are facing today is a kind of, imperial, tariff preferences.
Right,
this was what used to be there in the colonial times, when the Britain would impose imperial preferences, in which it will charge differently for different countries. But so this whole thing is going to really undermine. India, US, whether we like it or not, is a very big market. And then we also have the services side. And there again, the hit will be very severe, because he is asking India to take a permanent moratorium on what are called electronic commerce, e-commerce transmissions, where India is actually importing some of these services, but we also export several other services, and is also challenging India to do away with the VAT on the IT sector services and things like that. There are several components that must have influenced this particular decision. And I mean, it has to be said that this is a slap on Indian trade policy, the conduct of Indian trade policy.
That's right.
They ought to have known that this is not a regime with which you can, negotiate on favorable terms or fair terms and things like that.
Okay.
Today, we have a situation in the world where the biggest country, the world's most economically developed country and the biggest country, is acting like a least developed countries, where it
Hmm.
is asking for what are called special and differential treatment from all other countries. Even though it's the biggest country, it has tremendous economic clout. So it's a very odd situation, and it remains to be seen. I mean, to start with, with the way we conducted our trade policy, even 3 or 4 days ago, your commerce minister is saying that we are
That's
going
right.
to have a fantastic deal. We are going to reach an interim accord. And it all started with Narendra Modi, Prime Minister's visit to Washington in the month of February, where, we jumped the gun by announcing that we are going to enter into a big trade agreement with
That's
India,
right.
with the US. And in 5 years' time, this agreement will take the bilateral two-way trade between US and India to 500 billion.
Okay. But
And
do you think Indian exporters have any short-term options to mitigate these impending threats?
if the tariffs come into effect on 1st August,
That's right.
shipments that have been already sent uh, before 1st August will not be subjected to this 25% tariff. But shipments that will reach after 1st of August will be definitely subjected to this tariff, unless there is some change in his mind, which is
Hmm.
very unlikely at this juncture.
Okay. Okay. Interesting there. Also, you've talked about, what are the sector that can be dramatically affected because of what has happened. How much of this trade is about geopolitics, especially India's energy and defense ties with respect to Russia?
Yeah, that's another big question. I mean, this Trump regime, when they started the reciprocal tariffs,
Hmm.
their whole case was that A, we have suffered great trade deficits with countries, B, our industry has been underdeveloped over the last 20 years, and C, that countries have to pay for the surpluses that they are having, and that will enable us to create or build in new industry in our country, some kind of industrialization. But now what he's doing is he's mixing up trade with security issues, which is a very dangerous trend. I mean, in the past, the US always, set aside trade from security issues, and they dealt trade on its own footing, even though there were cases that they also made security deals through using the dangling the trade carrot. But now he is doing it very openly and nakedly, and that this is a situation which has never been witnessed in the last 80 years of global trade. When GATT was set up in 1948, that is General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, followed by the WTO in 1995. So
Hmm.
geopolitical considerations is one thing. I mean, today we have to wait and see what he does with China. By this
Okay.
evening, he will announce, there is a talk that he will extend the deadline for US and China to, continue negotiating on the tariff side, but he has several other interests. But the way he has brought this Russian oil into the picture at this point of time, and also accusing India that it has been buying all its defense needs, or meeting its defense needs from Russia, is a complete bilateral issue. I mean, it has got nothing to do with US. And for example, for countries which have been buying from US security defense equipment and all, at the same time, US was doing wars with several other countries. So, I mean, where does the buck stop? That's the big question. That you are constantly trying to, arm twist countries, using security on one side, using energy on the other side, and
That's right.
also using, a whole range of other, issues which are not strictly part of trade. In the global
I
trade,
request you to
since
Sure, sure. I request you, can you stay with us, Mr. Ravikant? We're joined by other guests as well. Top columnist Mr. TK Arun joins us, and we also have Sunita, Kaul, Zhutshi, senior journalist. Thank you very much, guest, once again. I want to go to Mr. TK Arun there. Sir, how much of this, could this tariff decision push India closer to alternative trade blocks or deepen ties with countries like China or, or Russia for that matter? TK Arun, sir, can you hear me? Okay, seems like there's a bit of a technical glitch there. But Sunita, would you be able to take this question? So how much of this is about, could this tariff decision sort of push India closer to alternative trade blocks or deepen ties with countries like Russia and China?
Actually, India has always been close to Russia.
That's right.
The point of what is important here is to note the shift in Mr. Trump's policy. He was pro-Russia before the elections began, but now it's all about punishing India for being close to Russia, for buying oil, for buying armaments and buying military equipment from them. So there is a geopolitical shift definitely taking place, and there may be a certain alienation, and the BRICS may get stronger. So every action has a reaction. If he pushes the trade to 25%, it's definitely going to impact Indian industry. They have to find solutions to go to places where production costs would be much cheaper. It would, of course, draw India closer, perhaps not initially towards Russia. Maybe they compromise and they buy some military equipment from America. They may be forced, their arms may be twisted. I see that more happening because, at the end of the day, the Russian relationship is a very old one. India cannot afford to forego it. But at the same time, when you look at the broader impact on the industry, it's going to be devastating. 25% is a huge amount. They may have to relocate, which is a long-term process. So perhaps India may be pushed into buying American equipment, military equipment.
Let me bring in Mr. Ravikant here. Sir, you did use very strong words, right? You called it a slap in the face of India's trade policy. I want to ask you this: how could India prepare for this right now? What leverage does India have in trade negotiations with the United States right now? Because we heard that the trade team is back in India. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, who addressed the press a couple of days back, he said, we'll be sort of striking a deal somewhere in October there, and we'll continue to keep India's self-interest right on top of our priorities. How do you respond to this?
So, from the day one, India has showed its hand. In a trade negotiation, you are always very circumspect and keep your cards close to your chest. In the case of India, from February itself, we've been going to town every day saying that we are going to strike a very big trade deal, we are going to do this, we are going to do that, knowing fully well that you have several constraints on your trade front. I mean, you have your macroeconomic conditions are almost different from many of the other countries. You have a huge population of 1.4 billion. You have 800 million people dependent on agriculture. You have so you ought to have been much more careful in what you are saying and what you could do, because the Americans will never move away from their very hardline stance on trade issues. If Donald Trump has been asking India to now acquiesce or agree to a 0% tariff for the American goods, that's a huge, huge blow. Now, we don't know what exactly transpired over the last 24 or 48 hours. There could well be a lot of geopolitical factors. There could also be, India has actually said that it will make a lot of defense purchases from US right from the day when Modi went to Washington in February. We had announced that we will buy several items in the defense, including even on the energy sector. India was prepared to agree to the Donald Trump demands. So where did the whole game went far? I mean, kaput rather. The plug was pulled by obviously Donald Trump. We don't know all the factors, but so this actually presents a great opportunity for India, because during this period India lost its south leadership role, because at one end you are trying to run with the Americans, and at another end you can't be coalescing all the southern countries. So we have a situation where India can actually, I mean, it may take time, but the BRICS is a great opportunity. In fact, Brazil is going to be hit by 50% tariff, even though Brazil has no trade surplus with the US. Similarly, South Africa is going to be hit. And China, of course, has its own strength and it can handle its situation. But there is a larger BRICS, alignment that ought to take place right now. And we have to, oppose this kind of special and differential treatment given to US at the cost of all other countries. What Trump is asking is, you close your factories, I'm not bothered. You open up your markets, my products will prevail over all other products. If you're going to have zero kind of percent tariff, as he did with Indonesia, and as he did with Vietnam and several other countries, including European Union, the mighty European Union fell, came under his submission on Sunday. So
That's right. That's right.
India might say, of course, if European Union can fall, if all other countries can fall, I mean, it's not a big blow to us. They'll put up a kind of
That's
a
right.
facade right now, but
Let
that is
me
not the case.
let me bring in Mr. Tiki in there. Sir, I mean, the Don has finally slapped tariff about 25% in India. And is this kind of unprecedented, or is it something that's expected widely there? And he also sort of, or you see it some kind of a very Trumpian way of a carrot and stick approach to have the upper hand in term on the negotiating table. How do you see this?
So let us say that it is not actually as bad as it might look at first hand. It says 25%, but then in relation to the tariffs levied on India's competitors and potential competitors, it is probably say 10% at most. We have to compare the tariffs on India with tariffs on Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, China, other countries, right? Which are also facing. So by levying steep tariffs on virtually every other country, the additional impediment that Indian exports face in the US will be the differential tariff, right? So if for most countries it is 15%, and if the final tariff on India is 25%, then effectively what India faces is a 10% tariff hurdle in relation to other countries. Because that differential is what makes Indian exports more expensive than exports from a competing country, right? So in very many cases, the competing countries have similar, even higher rates of import duty in the US. So let's not be worried too much. Now, there are two parts to this. It is not just this 25% tariff that is really troublesome. It is also the attempt to put pressure on India to abandon purchases from Russia of oil as well as arms. Now, this is virtually non-negotiable. We cannot allow another country to dictate to us where we will buy our strategic capacity to withstand enemy attacks. We saw the utility that the S-400 anti-missile systems played in Operation Sindhu. Now, if Trump was to tell us, no, you should not buy these armaments, and you should just rely on, say, Patriot missiles from the US, which are in short supply even for its close ally, Israel, we cannot accept this. We have the strategic autonomy to decide what is good for us, where to buy what from which country, and we should stick to that. There is no way we can compromise on that. Similarly, Russian oil. If we stop buying Russian oil, if China stops buying Russian oil, Brazil stops buying Russian oil, then that much of oil will go out of the total pool of available oil in the market. That means if you don't buy Russian oil, we'll have to buy from Saudi Arabia or from other countries which supply already to an existing pool of buyers. If you take out Russia's supply of oil, say 5 million barrels per day or something like that, then the world market will face a scarcity. Some extent might be made up by additional OPEC output, but the whole extent cannot be made up, which means oil price will go up, which means Trump's domestic inflation will go up, which means the US Fed will no longer be able to cut rates even if it wants to. And this will put pressure on the dollar. So Trump himself will face the turbulence he faced with the bond market once again, if he actually does manage to strong arm countries into stop buying Russian oil. So these are all things up for negotiation. Firstly, the 25% tariffs on Indian goods are not final. Secondly, we have to see this in relation to the tariffs levied on the other countries that also export to the US, the similar kind of products that we export. And let's understand, the most vital IT services exports are not covered by this. This is only the merchandise exports. So they also matter to us, but the most high value export that India makes to the US is the service exports, particularly IT and IT enabled service exports. They are not affected by this. So let's not get too worked up, and let us try to figure out what we can do. What is the leeway we have for negotiating these tariffs down, and assess what other possible markets we could have if some of our products can no longer be exported to the US.
Okay, that's Mr. Arun saying. So he says, it's not really as bad as we expected there. So, but I want to bring in Sunita as well here. Sunita, you wrote a detailed piece on how the Trump tariff could actually have an impact on the pharmacy of the world, India, particularly in the pharmaceutical sector, on the budget day, February 1st. I vividly remember this. But tell me, 25% average tariff, or how do you think that this could impact the pharmaceutical sector right now?
I'm not sure whether he'll come down on tariffs. I'm not sure this is the final verdict. I'm not sure that the Indian government won't lobby hard, because there are talks to be held later. So it's too premature to say that it will be 25%, first and foremost. Secondly, the pressure on the dollar is immense. Already it's immense because it's artificially low, as I've been repeatedly, saying. It's whenever you talk to any currency person, he says, the market rate is 90 per dollar. So the run on the dollar will be, of course, it will impact the dollar rupee exchange rate. But most of all, the generic pharmaceutical companies, those that are into generic medicines, they will face, they'll definitely face hardship. I'm not sure whether it will be 25% all across. So it depends on how hard the Indian government. It seems the Indian government has not lobbied hard enough, has not, threatened reciprocal tariffs, has not negotiated. I'm going to be bold enough to say that the Indian government needs to, because they can play the sympathy card that generic medicines are cheaper. Americans are not that rich. I mean, you see the average American, an average American is fighting for Medicare. It's a big issue in the West. All this issue about Medicare, about so they can use that kind of a card, the sympathy card, reaching out to the heartstrings of why they need to have lower tariffs on generic medicines, because generic medicines don't have any patents on them. So yeah, they could have done a lot with generic medicines by playing a different game altogether. That's what I think. I don't know what exactly is happening, but definitely it's not the last word. I mean, it could be lesser perhaps.
I take your point there. Mr. Ravikant, could this trigger retaliatory tariffs or other kind of trade barriers from India? You see that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is what China did. This is what Canada did, and several others announced, but they didn't do. That is again a huge flaw in our trade policy diplomacy. When the US announced the reciprocal tariffs on 2nd April, India should have actually threatened to retaliate, which it did not do. And India then said that we will take up the issue at the WTO. At the WTO right now, things are dead. The organization cannot in any way address or cope with Trump's tariffs. Third, I actually differ about this 25% not affecting India as much as we are expecting. First and foremost, we'll have to wait and see whether this 25% tariff will be sort of made final in the coming days. I'm sure there'll be a lot of talks that will be going behind the scenes. But you take the tariff, say 25% of India against 16% of Vietnam, 19% of Indonesia. Bangladesh will be less than 20%. So in one of the main areas of your export basket, namely textiles and all, you will definitely be affected whatever comparison you make. The second thing on the pharmaceuticals, in the EU-US deal right now, Ireland is one of the biggest exporters of pharmaceuticals because most of the pharmaceutical companies have moved from US and set up shop in Ireland. And they have a trade surplus of about 130 billion only in pharmaceuticals. Today, Ireland is crying hoarse that it will be definitely badly affected by what the agreement EU had reached with the US. And third, even on the IT sector services and all, the Trump government's demands are very high on this area. For example, they're saying that most of the IT companies have to reshore their production facilities, including in services. They are now, for example, targeting what is called there is a particular local tax which the European countries and Australia, New Zealand have been imposing in relation to not imposing what are called the customs duties on electronic transmissions. Now, that is going to be affected. India will definitely pay a price. So on several fronts, we might keep wondering what will happen in the American financial markets and stock markets and things like that. Yes, those developments will certainly impinge on whatever he's doing. But immediately trade is a thing that, this whole announcement causes an enormous uncertainty that should I export or should I not export? What will I do before 1st August? And what is the guarantee that these will be reduced even after 1st August? So what has Trump basically done? He has set off a trade tariff war among countries through his reciprocal tariffs. Every country is now forced to compare itself with several other countries in areas of its export interests. So we don't know. I mean, frankly, that this situation ought not to have come if India managed its overall trade negotiating policy well, which it has miserably failed. I'm sorry to say this, because having seen global trade negotiations from close angle, uh, I mean, it is true that European Union collapsed, but European Union collapsed not just because of trade, but they have security concerns. They want to beef up their defense sector in order to help Ukraine. Trump finds an easy way to, sell things to European countries, who in turn will help Ukraine, for example, in this batteries and several other items. He has said it openly, and it has also been commented by several American trade policy experts that he is primarily bringing security into trade. And today, India just cannot run away from Russia, with whom it has had a long relationship. Though there have been tensions in the recent past, the Russian oil has really helped India macro in your overall balance of payments and other things. So I mean, it's a very grim situation. It's a situation in which
Understand.
South-South trade has to flourish at this point of time. He's challenging actually the developing countries. He's offering an opportunity to them to align in a much more significant way to fight the Americans.
That's right.
So we are now holding the BRICS presidency, and BRICS meeting is going to take place in India. Actually, arrangements have to be made to arrive at this kind of a South-South trade, enhancement in a significant way. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Thank you very much. So, Mr. TK Arun also, sort of talks about India's foreign policy as well. Mr. Ravikant said this is a huge, sort of slap in the face of India's trade policy. He was a persistent critic of the trade policy, the trade negotiation that happened. My question to you, sir, you see this as some kind of a slap on India's foreign policy, because long time the Indian government has said, the Prime Minister Modi and US President Donald Trump is some kind of a caste those. They kept sharing some, some special bonding, special bonhomie. You see that the Aapki Baat, Trump Sarkar, and so on. You think it's kind of a blow for India's foreign policy in a way, because there's a bit of a tweak in terms of a foreign policy. We have not been sticking out of the Nehru's foreign policy of non-alignment. We've been shifting a little bit towards United States. You see that's going to change right now.
See, when you say shifting towards the United States, we are a part of the Quad, which is
That's
an
right, yeah.
alliance of Australia, Japan, India, and the United States, without being explicitly stated that this is against China. It is an alliance meant to contain China. We are part of that, and that's in our interest. It's not just in the U.S. interest. It's in the U.S. interest for India to be part of this alliance, because India is the only regional power in Asia Pacific which can counterbalance China, which is the reason why President Bush gave India the nuclear deal. And India has a nuclear deal precisely because of its importance. And this is not something that can be wished away by one man, Trump. So we still have leeway in negotiating our way through some of these threats that is imposed. That while tariffs on goods are perhaps something we can live with, for us to accept any condition that we will not buy arms on Russia is not something that India can agree to, and that will not be agreed to. We can commit to purchase more arms from the US, which we actually are. We have an engine deal with GE. We are committed to buying various other kind of military planes, other transport equipment from the US. So all this is fine. But many things we have a joint collaboration with the Russians. The BrahMos missile, for example, which we export to the Philippines, Malaysia, and other countries, that we will continue to produce. We will not discontinue several of those ties. We will have them. And as for pharma, I mean, if they don't buy generic drugs from India, where will they buy it from?
They could buy from Israel.
How much does Israel produce?
No,
and
Arun,
Israel also has duty. And pharma, he has threatened 200%. That man is crazy. One doesn't know what he will do. He has said he'll levy 200% on the category pharmaceuticals. So even if he doesn't do that, if he just is included in this 25% duty from India, the cost will be borne by the US consumer. Nobody is going to suddenly start producing drugs in the US. It will have to be imported from outside. And everywhere, he has levied high duties. Even on Israel, there are high duties.
Okay. I'm going to ask Mr. Ravikant to respond to this. Quick reply, sir. I'm
Yeah,
going to go
yeah.
to Sunita.
On the pharmaceuticals, actually, now we are having 20. I mean, he announced 25%. He's going to soon announce a sectoral tariff on pharmaceutical products under what are called Section 232 security related issues. So you're not just talking of 25%, you're talking of 25% for plus 50% on steel and aluminum, plus 25% on auto parts. And now he's going to soon announce a sectoral tariff on pharmaceuticals. He's going to announce also a sectoral tariff on chips. These
And
have
there's going to
been
be a
now,
penalty.
yeah, in addition. I mean,
That's right.
they're
And there's
not
going to be
just
a penalty for
penalty.
being a part of BRICS.
I mean, that is a different game. I mean, he's
Okay.
not in the European Union deal. He has told them that he's going to, because EU is a major supplier of pharmaceuticals, both generics as well as patented drugs. So he has told them that, in coming weeks, that US will announce what are called the Section 232 national security tariffs, under which the Americans want to they bring the entire pharmaceutical industry to US. I mean, that's what Trump wants to do. That similarly, Trump wants to bring the chips manufacturing all to the US. So there'll be a chips tariff also. Now, another issue, I mean, earlier I was unable to remember that is called the Global Services Tax. Now, most of the developed countries have what is called global services tax, which is a tax imposed on the internet big giants, IT giants like the Google, the Amazon, the Microsoft, Apple, and all. So now he wants to these countries to do away with this global services tax. Now that is where even India will come under the bracket, because we have a VAT on certain areas of services. So
So
we
India has
cannot
given it
sort
up.
of, huh?
India has given
Sorry?
it up. The digital tax, the Google tax, so called, India has given it up.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that clearly we have to challenge. I mean, this is a highest level of bullying. Bully, when you allow him to go unchecked, will do all kinds of things. But once you stand up to a bully, there is a prospect that it may not happen in the next 24 hours or 48 hours. But you have to prepare the ground, because China can manage its way through. I mean, China has tremendous leverage on the US at this point of time on the critical raw materials. And China is a huge competitor. So, in fact, here we have a situation, an ugly situation, where he is saying that I want to go to China. I'm waiting for the invitation
That's
from
right.
President Xi. And here, India going, without a proper invitation, lobbying for an invitation, and going there and making all this kind of grand pronouncements. Where have we landed today?
Okay. I have one last
I'd like
question.
to,
But that's right. Sunita,
I'd like
this
to add
comes.
something.
Sure,
I'd
sure, sure.
like to
Please
add
go. Yeah.
something here, that countries like India must take heart from the fact that investing in America is not the easiest thing. The dollar is really high. Whether it's China, whether it's India, any third world country, even the Middle East, after some time to invest, labor costs are there. The dollar is high. And it's not going to be a cakewalk for the US to actually to get investment in holds. We can, it's a short-term thing. We're getting euphoric about what's on ink, but let's see how this tariff thing works, even for his own desire to get investment into the US. It's not going to be easy, and
No,
especially if
I,
India
I,
wakes up to expanding, like Mr. Modi just visited Africa. So you have to find diversification, diverse markets for your products. And the government, like in the US, Coca-Cola, all these companies,
no,
because of what the government lobbied for. So Indian government has to lobby. They're just sitting and twiddling their thumbs. They should have done it. So take your industry to Africa, pharmaceuticals. I mean, it's a huge market. I'm
no,
a little bit optimistic on that.
I agree that setting up or rebuilding industry at this point of time in United States is a huge cost for any country, any company, any monopoly to enter. But nevertheless, that we have, he has 4 years time, correct? We are now in
4 years. 4 years.
25. 2029 is effectively when he ends, and in between of course comes 26 when the elections for the congress will take place. But at this point of time he seems to have all the momentum in forcing countries to fall in line with his completely disastrous kind of trade policies. I mean, or even economic policies. Most of the well-known economists have said that this is a setback for the U. It will be a big setback for the U.S. But in the
That's
coming
right.
4 years, if these particular things continue unabated, then you have a situation by then in 2019, 2029, even if there is a new administration, it will not be able to reverse the kind of things he's doing. For example, on tariffs, the Biden administration never reversed the Trump administration's first term's tariffs at all. And it did not even, it forced the countries to implement the same tariffs. So there is a certain continuity. I mean, if you have seen the American trade policy from 1784 to now,
That's right.
the successive administrations, when they bring massive changes, those changes do not disappear in any time soon, even regardless of the kind of forces that are arrayed against such development.
Well, in industry would
Before
shift
I wrap
it
up this
based on the
discussion,
US.
Sunita,
If the sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
Can
Sorry,
I go
Sunita, go
ahead?
ahead. Yeah, please. Yeah.
So what can happen is that the US companies will find a foothold somewhere else because the supply chain costs are going to be tremendous. You see, it's not going to be, as I said, it's not going to be a cakewalk. Your supply chain now it's diversified. It's a diversified world. So even if he does not remain in power after 4 years, and even if the next president does not rescind on what he has done, industry has its own way of evening out what government punishes it with, and they'll just shift pace. They'll start manufacturing. Of course, nobody will be able to penalize them if they do it in the proper way. They can always shift pace
No,
somewhere else.
they can always shift somewhere else, but he has already been threatening the American companies, the IT giants,
Giving
and
Apple,
so
for
many
example. That's right.
others.
Yeah, but then the
That's a
market,
problem.
but then they can sell their products also outside. For instance, as I said, Africa, it's a huge, even if you look at countries like Nigeria, whom we thought were ragamuffins, some years back, they're developing at such a fast pace. They have so much of extra income. The whole world is there. Then the Americans are going to pay higher for their imports because, any car company, Toyota, or anyone else will find some market somewhere else. And
Okay,
they'll find it more cost competitive
very, very
to
interesting. I
sell
have 2 more
another
minutes
market.
to wrap this conversation. It's very interesting. I've got another live coming up. So, Sunita, do you think, we had the Q1 results that happened. The IT sector the results were quite tepid. Do you still think the IT majors, have, there's a significant exposure to Europe and in the United States, rightly so. Do you think they are diversified enough globally to withstand a major disruption right now?
IT won't because it's all AI now, and AI is the US. Whether it is XAI or whether it is Google or whether it is, unfortunately, the sector, it's not the tariffs that have killed Indian exports. It's going to be basically the shift in technology that's going to impact the Indian industry. We've woken up too late to AI.
That's right.
That's my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but the death of the IT Indian industry will be its laggardness, or it's been a laggard as far as AI goes, and AI is in the hands of big companies. But then you never know; they may shift dates again. So there's always the other side of the coin to look at.
We have to draw
Thank you very
proper
much.
lessons from.
Could I just say one thing?
Yeah, please go ahead, sir. Yeah. Thank you, Arun, sir. Just 1 more minute, sir, before I wrap this up. Yeah.
Why Indian companies have missed the chance to develop their own AI models? AI is not something that only AI developers can use. Once you have created AI-enabled agents, anybody can use them. It's like a phone. How many people know how the phone works? Nobody knows, right? They can't make use of the phone, put the phone to use. Similarly, it will be like AI tools. So there will be any number of cases where AI tools are used for self-serving business, and in that, Indian IT companies will excel, like it has excelled in pre-IT, pre-AI era. So it is not such a major. Of course, it will be a disruption within the IT companies.
Unfortunately, AI
But in
requires a
terms
lot
of
of energy consumption.
Okay.
So
Okay.
India is not the best as far as energy goes. Production of electricity, there's a whole lot of issues. You need a lot of space, energy for energy production, whether it's power
That's
or
right.
our power
Yeah.
grids are not that strong. Our
like
power
so
production is not that strong.
Thank you, Mr. Ravikant, Mr. TK Arun, and Ms. Sunita Kaul. Zhutshi, thank you very much. Very insightful talking to each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.